Good afternoon. I am excited to be given an opportunity to speak with Ian Oxford about offshore wind today. As mentioned, Ian is the Chief Financial Officer of HST Marine, which owns and operates crew transfer vessels used in offshore wind. Welcome, Ian.
Thank you.
Perhaps just to set the stage a little, coming from the US, I know that the Biden administration has set an ambitious goal of reaching 30 gigawatts of generation capacity in offshore wind by year 2030. What's been happening around the world in offshore wind?
We've seen a significant demand for offshore wind in the last couple of years. I should probably just talk a little bit about my business as well, where we've started. So HST Marine is a crew transfer vessel company. We transport the technicians and their equipment out to the offshore wind farms. We started business back in 2017 when we realized there was a niche in the market for large crew transfer vessels. And in 2018, we took our first large Diamond 2710, large deck, take more technicians, work all year round. And it was received by the market very well. And we first thought we would be growing business by one vessel a year. And within 18 months, we had 4 of these. But we always wanted to go as green as possible, as quickly as possible. And we had conversations with a UK naval architect called Annie Page from Chart Marine back in 2020. And then we took delivery in August of 21 of the first battery hybrid CTV. And that was also received very well in the market. So much so that we've had the second and third built as well. One was delivered in February this year. They went on to a 3-year contract with Siemens. And then the next vessel will be delivered in August. That's going to a 5-year contract with Siemens. Jumping back into last year, there's a company called Purus Marine that we've been talking to for a while. There were a lot of synergies between the companies. And both companies wanted to be low carbon marine energy transportation companies. So the conversations continued. In August of last year, we were part acquired by Purus Marine. So now we sit within Purus Marine in a company called Purus Wind. And we've continued to grow the CTVs. Our fleet is now at 14, with 13 being built, all battery hybrid CTVs, some of them methanol ready as well. And it'd be remiss of me not to mention the commissioning service operation vessels that we have within Purus Wind, which we have one operating at the moment on a 5-year contract with Siemens. We have one being delivered next month, going on a 3-year contract with Siemens. One being delivered next year, another one in 2026, and we're looking at purchasing another couple. So, long story short, in answer to your question, we see there's a huge demand in offshore wind, certainly for these vessels, these green vessels, and with what we have in build, we see ourselves as the lowest carbon emission offshore wind support fleet when you look at CSOVs and CTVs. And we're giving our clients the opportunity to decarbonize their operations.
Maybe you and I were talking a bit prior to the panel, maybe just for the benefit of those who are not familiar, maybe describe a little bit about, sort of the different types of vessels used in offshore wind in terms of transferring people. We talked a little bit about the SOVs and, the daughter craft that goes along with it. How do they play different roles within offshore wind?
Well, there's different phases in offshore wind. The first is the commissioning and construction of the offshore wind farms. And you need a fleet of vessels to be able to do that, going from your survey vessels, your foundation installation vessels, cable laying, wind turbine installation vessels, and then your commissioning service operation vessels and CTVs. And after you've gone through that phase, which is anything from 1 to 3 years, you're talking about 50 vessels plus, then you're moving into the maintenance operation phase, which you'll predominantly need your commissioning service operation vessels and your crew transfer vessels for the life of those wind turbines, which is 20 to 30 years. So when we operate, we're either operating in commissioning and construction. So our crew transfer vessels work 24 hours. They work in conjunction with the CSOVs that are offshore, taking the technicians to the wind turbines. And then if we're into the maintenance operations phase, then it's normally 12-hour operations, and we're going in and out of ports.
Where do you mostly operate your vessels? I know you mentioned that you have a joint venture in America, as well as you have a hub here in Singapore.
It's predominantly in Northwest Europe. It's in the established markets, and there's still a lot of growth there in Germany, Netherlands, Denmark, UK. I think in the UK, we're supposed to be at 50 gigawatts by 2030. I think at the moment, with what's in construction, it's probably around 17 gigawatts. So all of our vessels are concentrated off North Shore, in the North Sea and offshore Europe at the moment. Yeah, we still see significant growth in that area. It will be coming in the States as well. I mentioned we have the JV, and that's been there for a number of years, so we're waiting for that to start. Again, they want to be at 30 gigawatts by 2030. And they have their own challenges with the Jones Act. But we're also interested in this part of the world as well. In Asia Pacific, again, countries just starting their journey. Australia, New Zealand, Vietnam. I think with Japan has just had their last round of auctions in December for, I think, 4 sites. They're looking to be at 6 gigawatts by 2030. And then South Korea as well, which is very interesting because of the shipbuilding experience. The local supply chain is already there within South Korea, so I think that's going to be a hub as well. But yeah, we'll start looking at this side of the world in the near future.
Maybe talk a bit more about the supply chain challenges and what kinds of opportunities there may be in regards to the supply chain.
If you look at the recent reports that are coming through, there was one from Clarkson's Renewable Energies team very recently that said the demand is certainly there. There's certainly a lack of supply of these vessels. They did a case study that looked at a UK offshore wind farm. Provides 600 megawatts, 84 turbines, powers 450,000 homes. That's over 50 vessels that was needed just for 600 megawatts. Cumulative around the world, I know there was a talk earlier on, it was about 60 gigawatts we're at the moment. We want to be at 289 gigawatts by 2030. And you're going to need a strong supply chain in order to do this. And that strong supply chain is your maritime assets. And it's not just any maritime asset. I think it's got to be the right maritime asset, such as a green maritime asset, a battery hybrid CTV or a methanol-ready CSOV.
How many hybrid CTVs do you have currently?
Well, we have 14 on the water, which half those are battery hybrid, and all the others that are coming are battery hybrid CTVs. Another 13, possibly 16, we take all the options, and the last 3 are going to be methanol-ready CTVs as well.
How do you finance your project? Is it mostly private capital? Do you get any kind of government funding?
No, we'd like to get some, but no, that doesn't happen. I think from the start, when we first started the business, we told a good story. We had some experience. Oh, sorry. Some very good experience, but we didn't have 3 years worth of finances. So it was very hard to find our finance at the start. We managed to do it, obviously, but banks don't like lending for small tickets. Again, we were looking for 1 CTV, that's 5-6 million euros. But now we're part of Purus Marine. The story has changed slightly. We have a lot of equity behind us. I'm not looking to just finance 1 vessel. It's a fleet of vessels. We've just financed 7 CTVs by a company called Pro Capital in the Netherlands, with ECA involvement as well, and the traders, and it's part of the Green Shipping Fund as well. So the funding is there, but it's not easy.
Financings aside, what are some of the other challenges in operating your company or operating CTVs in general?
We've been doing it for a number of years now, so we're kind of nailing it, I hope. It's great having the best asset, which I think we do with the hybrid CTVs, but it's not just about the final asset. You're going to need the crew as well. We started back in 2010, back in oil and gas, and then we saw the light in 2015, made the transition into renewables. But because we worked on a number of projects off the East Coast and West Coast of Africa, we had a number of crew, and they came with us into renewables. So I think we're a little bit further ahead with our competitors when it comes to crew. We also invest heavily in academy in Europe to make sure the crew are coming through are properly trained, and also we support maritime cadetships in the UK, and they come onto our vessels as well.
We talked a bit about the state of the offshore wind industry in the US and how it's moving a bit more slowly than some might like. Where do you see the offshore wind industry going in the next few years in general?
I think if we can get the investment that's required to build the vessels, then we've got some very ambitious targets there that we need to meet. There's climate commitments of reducing our greenhouse gases by 43% by 2030, but it's going to take investment. It's going to take investments from banks, and it's going to take or finance from banks and funders, but it's also going to take contracts from developers as well. What we've seen, certainly from the start of the business, it's always been building on spec. You turn up into the industry with your vessel, and then you'll get a contract 3 months, 6 months. I think that's starting to change as clients realize that there isn't the vessels in the market. We're starting to see longer term contracts coming before the vessel's actually built. So that is changing. But we need longer term contracts from developers, and preferably earlier on as well.
How did you become interested in offshore in the first place? Do you come from an energy background?
I'm actually ex-military, so I was ex-army. And then in 2010, started in East Africa, West Africa, but in oil and gas. But with colleagues, we saw the niche in the market in renewables and started to come across. And then after a couple of years, we started our own business. Yeah.
And how do you like it so far?
It has its challenges. Certainly on the finance side, that's probably where we get the sleepless nights. At the beginning of the business, it's very much on the cash flow and making sure enough cash in the business. That's not the case now. We're part of Purus Marine. We have a lot of equity there. But now it's more about meeting demand from the clients and getting those vessels funded.
Is your immediate plan to focus on the North European market, or do you see more opportunities globally?
I think the opportunities are coming globally. Again, if you look at those targets that countries have set themselves around the world, I think that's going to be coming. I think this in Asia Pacific is going to be a very interesting hub. There was talks earlier about floating wind, so we want to be geared for floating wind as well. It's offshore Scotland, but it's coming offshore Wales as well, which is where we're based. So yeah, we want to be focusing on that as well. I mean, we have done consultancy in this part of the world previously, but there's so much work going on in the North Sea, offshore UK, then yeah, we're focusing there at the moment.
It's a quick interview, unfortunately, and we'll certainly continue this discussion outside if any of you in the audience would like to join us. But some final thoughts? What are your worries? What keeps you up at night?
Just that financing. I think it's changed now being part of Purus Marine. I mean, we're surrounded by smart, intelligent people that are really driven and can really help grow the business. But it's funding those vessels going forward. Yeah.
Some government funding would be nice.
That's always nice, yeah.
Well, thank you, Ian, for an insightful discussion. It is wonderful to hear about your commitment to the offshore wind industry and the energy transition at large. And thank you to the audience for listening, and have a wonderful rest of the conference.
Thank you.